Hi everyone, welcome back to the Pro MMA Betting podcast. So we've got a quick turnaround since the last podcast as we've got a card on Wednesday this week. Not often throughout a UFC calendar year we get midweek cards. I think maybe we might get 3, 4, 5 at a push. So I do look forward to them. It's always nice to have basically 3 UFCs in a week. And then we've got a week off after this one as well. I guess I would have preferred that they just done a card each weekend, but they're in Abu Dhabi, so I guess it makes sense for them to get in and get out as quickly as possible. I guess it's a money saving option for them. So we've got the card coming up in a couple of days. Just recap as we always do. First show of the year, we'll recap on results. So it was a fairly small card for me and for members. We just had a unit on the underdog Jocelyn Edwards at plus 138, which came in for us. She opened at like plus 200, which was just crazy for me. I kept her as a slight favourite. I did expect her, to be honest, to look a bit better than she did. She still looked pretty raw to me. I was expecting her not to look as raw, but she got away with it basically on her savagery and physical strength, which is what I picked up on tape, but I definitely was expecting her to look a bit cleaner. So not kind of sure what her ceiling is at the moment, but I definitely felt the odds were off there and it came in for us. And we also had a unit on Lee versus Ponzinibbio going over 1.5. Unfortunately, that didn't come in. I thought Ponzinibbio would start a bit slow, which he did. He was really struggling with his timing. He looked like a bit of a regressed fighter, unfortunately. But it's hard to say. We was getting towards the end of the first round. I did expect him to look slow and struggle with his timing and whatnot to begin with. That's why I held back on live betting as well, because Lee was clearly winning the first round, and the odds were good. But I just thought Ponzinibbio might start to find his timing. I didn't want to kind of write him off completely. I've kind of got to. As I always say, I don't have rules set in stone, but I've got a general rule of thumb with regards to live betting. I don't like pulling the trigger too early because sometimes it takes people a little while to settle into a fight and things can change. And an example of that, funnily enough, is I did pull the trigger on Taha against Felipe on live betting. I'm just trying to think when I did pull the trigger. I think it was in the first round. But I just thought he was absolutely tooling him. Or maybe not tooling him, maybe that's too strong a phrase, but he was comfortably winning. Felipe likes to get his volume boxing going. It looked like he was tentative about stepping in because he was worried about getting caught. Taha was really letting the kicks go. And then second round, Taha winning comfortably in the second round, first half of the round. And then heavyweight. He got caught with a big shot. It kind of changed the tide of the fight. It was still a really close fight, but that's all it takes at heavyweight to change the tide of the fight. So kind of broke my own rule there, and it came back to bite me, unfortunately. So the over anyway, back on a Ponzinibbio Lee fight, didn't come in for us. So slight profit. With regards to live betting, we had a few bets on live betting. We started off with a win. We took, just bringing up the live betting results. We took Austin Lingo decision after round 2 about minus 190. Clearly 2 rounds up. You could see he was slowing down. I really didn't see him finishing, and that came in for us. But we did take a couple of losses. We took a stab at David Zawada after round 2 at plus 200. We took half a unit on him. Don't regret that at all. I think the value was there. I think it should have been closer to a 50-50 going into round 3, and it was a close fight. I mean, the scorecards were kind of all over the place. I think one judge gave Zawada round 1, but round 3 was Zawada could have won round 3. He exhibited poor fight IQ, which is something I did flag up before the fight when I done the podcast, and it was something that a lot of fighters do. He got on top of Akhmedov and he settled in side control. Unless you're a real top level grappler and there's a huge grappling disparity, you just can't go to side control. It's too easy for guys to get back to their feet. You've got to settle in half guard. And he settled in side control. He eventually ended up in half guard, but then he went to mount, which again, unless you've got real solid top control, mount's very risky. I get why fighters do it because it's a strong position and there's a chance you can finish the fight from there, but you just end up losing position. And he ended up losing position and ended up back on their feet. And I mean, I thought the round could have gone either way, but ultimately the judges went with Ameve. But if he just settled in half guard, he could have rode out that decision. Maybe not for the whole of the round, but he could have bought more time on top, which would have gone a long way because there wasn't much on the feet when they went back to the feet. So we lost half a unit there. And as the one I've already mentioned, we took Tahara about even money. And, I don't really regret that bet. He was very comfortable, but it's a heavyweight fight. All it takes is one punch to change it, and that's what happened. And, I mean, you can still argue he got the decision. It was a close fight. I think we was unlucky to lose 2 split decisions there, Zawada and Tahar. So we took a slight loss on live betting, but it's part of the game. Now, as I say to the members, if you look at the live betting tracker, we've made on live betting over 500 bets now on the tracker, and we're up 164 units, but we only win about 60% of the live bet. So, 6 out of 10 win, 4 out of 10 don't. So you've got to be prepared to take the losses. The real value with the live betting is getting really solid dog odds. That's where you make your money. And obviously they're not all going to come in. That's why they are dogs on live betting. I mean, a lot of the times the books make mistakes on live betting. You've got to be very quick. But there's a reason normally that the person is favoured. But normally the line is just too wide. And like Zawada as an example, that plus 200 almost came in for us. And it could have if he thought a bit smarter. So basically a nothing night, break-even night across pre-betting and live betting. Slight loss on live betting, slight profit on pre-bets. So we've got the Wednesday card coming up. As always, I'm going to break it down from bottom to top. If you want to sign up for the service, guys, ProMMABetting.com. The packages are available there. We've got weekly, monthly, 6 monthly, yearly. 95% of members are with us for the year. Pre-betting and live betting service. Live bets are given out on Discord. The channel is frozen during fights, so no one else can chat. You'll just see my messages if there's a tip to be given. As I say, packages on the website. DMs are open if you've got any questions on Twitter. Hit me at Pro MMA Betting. Give us a follow. Like on this page would be greatly appreciated. And if you want to subscribe, let's try and grow the channel as much as we can. I think on predictions I went 7-2 on the night. I never gave out a prediction for the main event just because I ended up not taping it because I thought it was going to be a close fight, and ultimately it completely wasn't. A complete shutout from Holloway. So anyone that bet max there, good bet. But let's get cracking on this card on Wednesday. So as I say, bottom to top. I don't know if this is the first fight, but the first fight I'm just going to mention is the Bantamweight bout between Umar Nurmagomedov and Sergey Morozov. Haven't dug into tape, guys, just because Umar's minus 500. I'm not betting someone in the UFC at minus 500, especially making a UFC debut. I had a quick look at their record, so I've completely wiki-capped this fight, and it didn't look to me on paper like Umar should be a minus 500 favourite. A couple of guys I chat with regarding fights who have taped this, but one of them thought it should be lined a lot closer. Another guy thought it was probably a little bit wide, but Umar's going to win, and that was kind of enough for me just to not even bother with tape. So I'm not even going to cast an opinion on it, guys. It's just too wide. Nurmagomedov, the name goes a long way. You're going to have that built into the price. So, if his surname wasn't Nurmagomedov, I'm sure the line would be closer. But stylistically, it sounds like it's a good fight for Umar. But minus 500, I'm gonna swerve. And there's not many fighters in the UFC that are kind of like plus 400 odds wise. So I'm passing. But I mean, by all means, have a look if you're interested in the dog. I don't think you should be using Umar in parlays, etc. So that's a pass one for me. I have taken the rest of the fights though, so we'll break down the rest of the fights. So we've got the women's flyweight fight, Victoria Leonardo versus Manon Fiorot. This is what I class as a low-level women's MMA fight, guys. So there was 2 on the Saturday card. You had Jocelyn Edwards, who I've already discussed, who we bet, and you also had the Vanessa Mello fight. I called both the dogs there, just not because I'm some great reader of women's MMA, just because when it's a low-level women's MMA fight, I just think there's profit to be made betting the underdog. especially when, the odds are quite wide. Now, when, it's closer, like, I don't know, -130 versus +110, it's not as enticing. But when we're talking +150 and upwards, I just think low-level women's MMA, you can't go wrong betting the underdog. We've got Roxanne Modafferi versus Viviane Araujo on this card as well. Now, that's not a fight I would class as low-level women's MMA. So just to break that down, I'm not saying every women's MMA fight, bar championship level fights or championship level fighters, is low level. But this first fight is one I would definitely class as low level. Fiora, I went back and watched a lot of her fights. I went all the way back to her debut against Leah McCall just because I wanted to see how she lost that fight, because I watched the last 3 fights and she's basically facing opponents who are overmatched, all one-way traffic. It's always hard to get a read on a fighter when they're completely dominating. I like to see a little bit of adversity and to see where perhaps a weakness is. But the McCourt fight is 2.5 years old, so you've got to assume there's been improvement. She's a bit of a karate fighter. Reminds me a little bit, now I'm not comparing her to Wonder Boy, but she's kind of got that kind of style in a women's essence. She likes to sidekick, likes to move in and out. That kind of karate style with her stand-up. As I said, last 3 fights, she's completely dominated the opposition. We haven't seen any of her grappling basically since the McCourt fight, which is where she struggled. She got taken down a few times. It was a close fight, lost a split decision, but that was her weakness. And, we just haven't seen it since, which it just makes it difficult for me to get a full read on a fight, especially when it's lower level women's MMA. And Fiora's not exactly young either. She is 30 years of age, so it's not like she's a youngster who we can assume is going to be making big leaps. She's facing Victoria Leonardo, who is a step up in competition for Fiora. A lot of you would have seen Leonardo on the Contender Series recently, where she was a big underdog. Chelsea Hackett had a lot of hype, striking background, well known in the women's Thai boxing world. She got Hackett down and pounded her out. I watched Leonardo's fight before that as well against Liz Tracy, who I know is a decent wrestler for women's MMA standards, and won a decision there. She got Liz down a couple of times as well. Liz did get back to her feet quickly, but this is definitely a striker versus grappler fight. If he stays on the feet for 3 rounds, Mannon's going to win the fight. But if Leonardo can get some takedowns going, get her down to the floor. Chelsea Hackett really struggled on the floor. I mean, Hackett, very green, probably greener than Mannon. But if Leonardo can get the ground game going, we just haven't seen Mannon in 2.5 years on the ground. And that's when she struggled in her professional MMA career, was when she was taken down. So there's no guarantee that she's shored up her takedown defence here. I think she trains in Europe as well, which always bodes a bit of a question mark for me, and I'll be touching on that with another European fighter on this card as well, with the same kind of question marks basically. So for me, it's dog or pass for me. A lot of money's come in on Mannon. I mean, I know some guys that are probably responsible for a lot of this line movement, but I mean, even when it was a pick'em, I hadn't taped it at that point. By the time I taped it, Leonardo was a considerable dog, but I just don't feel I've got a strong read on the fight, and I wouldn't have bet Mannon even at pick'em. So I'm going to pick Leonardo at these odds. She's like +160. I think the value's with her. It's low-level women's MMA. I'm sticking with the motto that I've outlaid in terms of how I'm going to be treating low-level women's MMA fights. Generally, as I say, it's a general rule of thumb for me. There's always exceptions to a rule, but this one I'm sticking to the general rule of thumb, and I'm going to pick Leonardo as the underdog. But I'm not confident. If Mannon has shored up her takedown defence and ground game, it could be a long night for Leonardo. It's a big unknown. 2.5 years we're talking here. So the pick is Leonardo by decision most likely, unless Mannon is pretty poor on the ground, and we have seen Leonardo can finish. Next fight, lightweight fight, Mike Davis taking on Mason Jones. Really looking forward to this fight. I know Mason Jones very well. I've bet him a lot on Cage Warriors. He's been very profitable for me. He just won the welterweight title on Cage Warriors to follow up his lightweight title success. Beat a guy a lot bigger than him. I had a bet on Mason in that fight. When the odds dropped, he dropped down to, I think it was about -130. The kid's a savage. He's the kind of guy I don't like betting against because he just keeps coming forward. He's like a Terminator. He will keep coming, he'll apply pressure. But this is a step up in competition for him, and he is hittable. He's definitely there to be cracked, and Mike Davis is definitely the best boxer he's faced. Mike Davis has very sharp hands, very good boxing. It's a really interesting fight, this one. He tried fighting at featherweight, but he's gone up to lightweight now. He's got a lightweight frame. I don't know how he was making featherweight. This is a better move for him, I'm sure. We've not seen him for over a year. He's been at American Top Team, so there could be improvements there. He gave Thomas Gifford the beating of a lifetime. Horrendous beatdown. The fight should have been stopped by Gifford's corner. Before that, we saw him lose to Gilbert Burns, and we saw him lose on the Contender Series 2.5 years ago now to Sadiq Youssef. Calf kick was the main weapon there for Sadiq. I think it was mid-round one, the calf was starting to play up for Mike Davis, and as we all know, when these calf kicks land and your leg's compromised, it just changes the direction of a fight. But he lasted, he showed some toughness, got through to the end of the fight, got dropped as well in that first round. So, he's tough. I completely see why people would bet Mike Davis here. He is the cleanest striker, and early on I can definitely see Mason struggling. He's going to be at a speed disadvantage. He's just at a technical disadvantage, and round one could be rough for Mason. So I completely see why people would bet Mike, but I just can't. I can't bet him, especially at it's like minus 190, because in MMA, grit, toughness, forward pressure, just pure savageness, it goes a long way in MMA. And Mason Jones has it. Now, whether he can stand up to Mike's power, I don't know, because I think he is going to eat some clean shots, and I don't think he's going to be able to get his grappling going here. He's got a solid judoka background. He's got good hips. I see his plan out on the feet. But the risk for Mike is if he does kind of unload the kitchen sink in round one, the pressure Mason applies, it's the kind of pressure where you'll slow down. Now, Mason was slowing down in his last fight against Adam Proctor, and it was over in round one, but he was facing a guy a lot bigger than him, and he was also carrying more weight than he normally would because it was up at welterweight. So I have to assume that affected him, because normally he's the type of guy that can just stay in your face for 3 rounds. So this is a tough fight for me to call, because I can definitely see it being a tale of two fights. Mike starting strong, but if he can't put him away, Mason coming into the fight, and if it comes down to round 3, then I definitely favour Mason. So it's a tough one. Look, as I always say, this is a betting podcast. I'm not just going to pick who I think wins if I think the line's off. Again, general rule of thumb, not set in stone, but generally I will pick the guy where I feel where the value lies. And I haven't bet this fight, just disclaimer, but if you put a gun to my head, I'd probably go, I'm going to pick Mason here, but I would not be shocked if he gets blasted in round 1, because he is open, he can be hit, there's a speed disadvantage, athletic disadvantage, as I've already said, but the guy just keeps coming, and if he can withstand the shots, I'm in two minds. This is a hard one for me to call. This is real hard. If I'm in two minds, I've got to go with Mason just because of the line. If it was a pick-em line, I would pick Mike Davis, and I probably would bet him. But with the line the way it is, I have to pick Mason Jones. As you can tell, I'm not confident, so I wouldn't bet the fight personally. But if you're one of these guys that likes to bet every fight, I think the value is with Jones. But be aware, he might get knocked out in the first round. But he will fight for your money. If you're one of those that likes betting on guys that are going to fight for your money, he's not going to flake. You haven't got to worry about that with Mason Jones, which is the most frustrating thing when you put money on someone and they flake out, which is easy for me to say sitting behind my keyboard. But that Mason is someone that is going to fight for your money. So I'll go with Mason, but it's not confident, and I can see Mike winning. But I think the value's there. I think the line's just a little bit wide. So we'll go with Mason for an upset there. Francisco Figueiredo, the brother of the champ, is making his UFC debut, Flyweight division against Jerome Rivera. Figueiredo, I just watched his last fight. He won a 3-round decision. Similar style to his brother. He moved forward, apply pressure. He's not got the concussive power that his brother has, and doesn't seem to have the chin. Like when his brother gets hit, they just seem to bounce off of him. Figueiredo, I don't get that feel. I mean, not that I've seen him being hurt, but I just don't get the feel that he's kind of got the strong chin that his brother has. But he does fight similar, but he's just not as good as his brother, basically. I saw a lot of people kind of ragging on him before I done tape, but he wasn't as bad as I was expecting based on what people had said. And Jerome Rivera, I had some money on him on the Contender Series, and I felt really lucky to get that decision, if I'm completely honest. And then he made his UFC debut against Tyson Nam, and he tried to fight Nam from the outside, which is the right thing to do because Nam's a very heavy puncher. And he had a decent first round, just pot shotting, landing kicks from distance, but then he just got melted at the start of the second round. And I don't know, I didn't like the look of him physicality wise on the Contender Series. He was just getting out muscled by that kid. He can't get his takedowns going, it seems, at the higher level, which means he's stuck on the feet. And I have to lean Figueiredo here. I mean, he's minus 150. I think he might look a little bit better here as well than we've seen on the regional scene. You often see it with guys that come off the regional scene. They look better in the UFC. I can't exactly put my finger on why. I don't know whether it's maybe they're going through the motions a little bit on the regional scene, and when they get to the big show, it's a bit of a kick up the bum for them. I don't know. It's a hard one to answer, but you often see it where they just don't look they look more improved when they come into the UFC, and I think you might see that from Figueiredo here. And he's coming in. He's got that big name, Figueiredo. He's the brother of the champ. So I just think I'm not sure if he stops Rivera, but I see it being a little bit like Rivera's going to try and fight long again. He has got that long frame for the division, but I just think Figueiredo's going to stay in his face and do enough to rack up points and win a decision. I'm just not sold on Rivera being ready for the UFC yet, so I'm going to go with Figueiredo there. Next, men's middleweight division, we've got Doucher. I'm not even going to attempt to pronounce his surname. Regular listeners will know I'm terrible with surnames. Versus Marcus Perez. Doucher is cutting down to middleweight here. I think that's going to be a rough cut for him. He's absolutely shredded at light heavyweight. I don't know where he's losing the weight from. I mean, maybe he's losing it from his traps because his traps are ridiculously big. He's got a 3-inch reach advantage here. Doucher fights out of an orthodox stance. Marcus Perez, orthodox as well, but I'm sure, does he not switch here? I'm sure I remember him having a pretty good body kick, but maybe he was facing fellow southpaw, but Fight Metrics got him listed as orthodox. Interesting fight. Perez is in on fairly late notice here. Doucher, I can't remember who Doucher was meant to face, but I think Perez has had maybe like 3 weeks notice or so for this fight. He trains at American Top Team now. He's coming off a loss a few months back to Duplessis, the South African chap. Perez was actually looking good in that fight. He was applying a lot of pressure. He was landing some decent shots. He was actually fighting a lot more, what's the word I'm looking for? A lot more fundamentally sound than he normally does. Normally he's a bit all over the shop. A lot of low percentage stuff, but here he was fighting pretty smart, but ultimately his low percentage stuff is what led to his downfall here. He went for, I don't know what you call it, that elbow he does where he like ducks down and swings the elbow up. He got a knockout on the regional scene doing it. I remember watching it when I've taped one of his fights previously, and it's something he tends to go to, and it actually caused him to get knocked out here because Duplessis caught him. I don't know if it was partially on the back of the head, but it was one of them behind, one of them fluky behind the ear shots where it just takes away your equilibrium, and he just went down. So normally he's really durable, Perez. He takes a shot really well, but them shots behind the ear, stroke back of the head, they're just dodgy. It doesn't, they just seem to shut your lights out for a split second. And that's what happened here to Perez. So I've got no reason to doubt his chin. I still think he's very durable. It was just one of them spots where just get hit in the wrong place. So, but I did like how he was looking fundamentally before that anyway. And before that, he lost to Wellington Turman. So he's coming off back-to-back losses now. He's lost 3 of his last 4 in the UFC. He's lost 4 out of 6. So this is probably his last shot. I wonder if he was expecting another shot. So he's coming in short notice here. He has shown gas tank issues in the past, Perez. So he does need to try and pace himself. Doucher, I mean, really athletic, explosive guy. Big power. Judoka background. Townsend fight, he mainly was taking Townsend down. He would like explode with a 1-2 and then hit a takedown. Like, he's really explosive. Magomed Ankalaev, he was just, outmatched against. Ankalaev looks like a title contender. And ultimately, he got a pretty brutal knockout, took a front kick to the face that put his lights out. But it was over a year ago. So it's going to be interesting, this fight. I think Doucher's going to struggle to take down and hold down Perez. But he's got that freaky explosiveness where he does get in on your legs because he's just so quick. But I don't know how he's going to be cut into middleweight. I mean, he's such a muscular guy. I wonder how much he's going to take out of him. But then there's some issues with Perez as well. Now, the line, I remember when I saw the line opener, Perez was like plus 300, which was crazy. I don't really see much value now on the fight. Doucher's a minus 135 favourite. I mean, Perez is the kind of guy you only really want to bet as an underdog. He's not someone that you want to be betting as a favourite, just because, although he did look a bit more fundamentally sound, he's a bit of a crazy guy still. And he's 4-6, 2-4 in the UFC. So it's he is UFC level, but he's definitely lower UFC level. But Doucher falls into that area as well. But it's just hard to know where he's going to look at middleweight. You see it more and more now, moving down in weight. It just doesn't pay off generally. Normally it's the guys that move up in weight that seem to have more success. So I just don't know. The overs 1.5, it's slightly favoured. I think if there's any value on the fight, that's where I'd be looking to bet. Perez is very durable. Like I said, I don't read too much into that KO loss. It's just one of them fluky shots. Besides that fight, he'd never been stopped before. And Doucher's been stopped in both of his losses now. Ankalaev in round 3. Ankalaev's a beast. And he got submitted back in 2015. Got submitted in the second round. But, I mean, I've not seen that fight. But 5 years ago, you've got to assume he's improved. And Perez, as I say, very durable. He is opportunistic. You saw that against Ian Heinisch, the way he snatched up that submission. But to catch out on someone like Doucher, who especially early is going to be really strong and really explosive, I don't see it's going to be hard to lock something up on him early. Maybe if he tires second half of the fight, but with the explosiveness and strength that he has at the first half of a fight, I just see it being hard to stop a guy like that. And Perez is probably going to be a little bit tentative on the feet because of the speed and explosiveness of Doucher. So for me, the over, I have to pick a winner here. I'll pick Perez just based on him. I don't think there's any great value at the current lines, but he's the dog. I definitely wouldn't bet Doucher as a favourite. I don't know if there's anyone in the UFC I'd bet him against. And there's the question mark about his cut here. But Perez is short notice as well, and he has slowed down in the past. So this could turn out to be a bit of a sloppy fight if they both tire. But I'll go with Perez. But, he's a hard guy for me to trust as a bettor. Doucher is as well. I think the over is the best bet on the fight, personally. Next, we've got Sue Mudaji. I'm probably butchering that surname. I'm going to butcher the next guy, Zaruk Adashev. I'm pretty high on Sue. I like his striking. The question mark with him is his ground game. Seemed to have shored that up a little bit against Sukhumtov with stuff in the takedowns, and he trains over in Dagestan as well, which, where better place can you go to improve your strike, your wrestling, your takedown defense, your offensive wrestling, etc. So I like him. I think he's a very solid striker. Adashev, it's hard to get a full read on him. His first UFC fight obviously blown away really early. I mean, the line's crazy. Sue's like minus 500, I think. So I'm sure people have been throwing him in parlays and so forth. And I am picking Sue. I do like him on the feet. I think he's going to outstrike Adeshev. Adeshev's a glory kickboxer, but just because you're a glory kickboxer, it doesn't automatically mean that you're this great striker. And I really like Sue on the feet. I think he's a really good kickboxer. And I just think he's going to be too much for Adeshev. But, the over is 1.5. It's a flyweight fight. It's always hard to bet on a flyweight fight ending under 1.5. So it might be a little bit of an overreaction to his one-punch knockout loss to Nam. So maybe there's some value on the over. But, I mean, Sue did have Sukumtov hurt, and Sukumtov is very durable. I don't think Sukumtov's ever been hurt. So it's just a pass fight for me. But I'm going to pick Sue, but there's no value there. But I do like Sue. I hope he looks really good here because I think he's a promising prospect. Next fight on the card, we've got, I think it's the Ricky Simone fight. Let me just bring up the card. Ricky Simone, taking on a late notice Italian, Gaetano Perello. Perello's coming in here on pretty short notice. I think he's taking this fight on a couple of weeks' notice. Let me just bring up his record because I know Simone pretty well, so I didn't really go into Simone tape, but I wanted to have a look at Perello. Regular listeners probably know he's not Italian actually, sorry, he's Belgium. Perello, is that not an Italian name? But he's listed as being from Belgium, and now that I recall, I remember looking at his Instagram and so forth, he does train in Belgium. I think he's spent some time over in Holland as well, so my mistake. I went back and watched a few of his fights. Now, he was on Cage Warriors years ago. I didn't go this far back to the Arnold Allen fight. It's like 6.5 years ago. It's pretty irrelevant. Just trying to see. I watched his fight with Manolo Sciana because it went to a decision, and it's one of his few fights that does go to a decision. I'd much rather watch a guy fight over 3 rounds than watch him win 3 fights in a row inside a couple of minutes. It doesn't tell me anything. You just don't get any answers about their overall game generally, how they overcome adversity, how their cardio looks. So I went, I mean, it's not ideal because it is 3 years ago and guys make improvements. Now, as I said when I done the last podcast, I done a lot of this tape, some of it before Christmas, some of it over Christmas. So we're going back 3 weeks. This one, I don't think it was 3 weeks ago because Perello is a late notice replacement. But I've done so much tape since. I'm struggling to recall what I saw on tape in this Sciana fight. But I think I definitely didn't overly like what I saw. I'm pretty sure there was one fight I watched where he got taken down a few times. And if you're getting taken down on the European regional scene and you're going in, I think that was the fight actually against Jaziro Boy that he lost. He was getting taken down in the first round. Or was it the Sciana fight? Sorry, guys, I can't remember what fight it was, but there was definitely one of his fights. It was either the Jaziro Boy fight or the Sciana fight where he was getting taken down and he was held down. I think it was the Boy fight that he lost, and he ends up getting knocked out pretty nastily in the second round. Since the Boy fight, he's fought 2. Both fights are available, but they're 2, real regional level guys that he just blows through really quickly. I did notice, though, physically he looked a bit better in them fights. Like he'd maybe dropped a little bit. Not that he was showing fatness or anything, but it just looked like he was a little bit more ripped in those 2 fights. So the question mark obviously is the Boy fight is 2.5 years ago. He could have improved a lot. 2.5 years is a long time. But when I looked at his Instagram, it looks like he trains in, as I said earlier, between Belgium and Holland. There are good wrestlers in these countries. A lot of guys, emigrate to other countries. Like even here in the UK, we've got like a lot of Eastern European guys that live here now and will take wrestling classes. So I'm not saying you can't get good wrestling looks, but iron sharpens iron at the end of the day, and it's just hard to really excel in a certain area. And against someone like Ricky Simone, you've got to have some real good takedown defense to stop him taking you down. And even with some improvements, I just don't see him keeping Ricky off of him. And, people have identified this. Simone's been bet up now to about minus 400. So, the value's gone because Ricky Ricky's chin is always a little bit of a question mark in my mind. We saw him get knocked out on the regional. I don't know if it was a regional scene. I can't remember what show it was. Maybe it was Titan. I can't remember. He got knocked out by what's the guy's name? The Brazilian guy that's in the UFC. Fight Simone was comfortably winning, then he gets knocked out. I think it was in the second round. And we obviously all saw the Uriah Faber fight where he got put away early. So, but then you go and watch the Rob Font fight. Rob Font, a big puncher, and he takes Rob Font's punches. So, sometimes this sport is just so hard to read. So, if you didn't watch any other Ricky Simone fights and just watch the Rob Font fight, you think, oh, this guy's got a solid chin. So who knows? But yeah, you've got to go with Ricky Simone here. As I said, there's no value, and as I say, it's a betting podcast, but it's a general rule of thumb, and I'm not picking against Simone here. This would be a huge upset, in my opinion. I just can't see how this guy is going to keep Simone off of him, and he's taken it on short notice as well. Simone, ridiculous pace he can set over 3 rounds. I mean, he's not got the best top control. Guys do tend to get up from under him, but he just takes you back down. But having said that, Ricky Simone can, he can be dragged into a little bit of a brawl sometimes, so he's got to be smart here. And he did show good fight IQ actually against the Brazilian guy whose name escapes me. Let me just have a quick look. He wouldn't go to the ground with him. He kept the fight steady. It was smart fight IQ. Rani Yaha. He fought really smart in that fight. And he did try and ground Rob Font. He just couldn't keep Rob Font down basically. And then he had the win over Ray Borg. I was pretty big on Ricky Simon there against Ray Borg, and yeah, I mean, he got the first 2 rounds of his wrestling basically and struggled a little bit on the feet in round 3, but I just see him being able to take this guy down whenever he wants. So I'm going to go with Simone, and I'm not surprised people have been putting him in parlays, in all honesty. Next fight is the last fight on the preliminary card before we hit the main card. It's Omari Akhmedov against Tom Breese. This is a fight that I've got no strong inclination on this fight at all. I came away from tape thinking that I think the value's with Omari, to be completely honest. Tom Breese, he always gets overrated in my opinion. Now, look, I can see why guys like him. He's got very good boxing. I know he does a lot of grappling competitions. But for me, it's what's between the ears. That's Tom Breese's big weakness. There's definitely a mental weakness there, and I just don't think. I think for fighting, it's just something you can't really fix. It's just always going to be a problem for you, and I just always worry with Tom when he doesn't get the fight he wants and he's not in full control. How is he going to react? And Omari Akhmedov is a guy that he's got holes in his game. He slows down for one every fight pretty much. The guy slows down in the fight because he just throws hammers when you're on the feet. He can't throw anything kind of tight or light. Everything's 100%. He's a real tense guy. So, every fight he's going to slow down, and if you make it to round 3 with him, there's a good chance he's going to lose round 3. Just looking at his record, so we saw that against Chris Weidman. He looked in full control, then he ends up getting grapple fucked in round 3. Ian Heinisch fight, he lost round 3. Zach Cummins and Tim Boach, I think he won round 3 in both them fights, but kind of none of them done anything. Real low pace fight. In the Marvin Vettori fight, he ended up drawing because he lost the 3rd round 10-8. It's just been a weakness for him, and he got knocked out in round 3 against Zaleski and Sergio Moraes. But he's definitely better suited to middleweight. I don't know how he was making welterweight. He's, physicality-wise, he's still strong as an ox. And he makes guys hesitant because he throws with so much power, and he can mix wrestling in as well. He's got some decent wrestling. He's, very physically strong guy. Now, I remember, you assume Tom Breese is going to have a bigger reach, but he doesn't. When you see him, his arms are really short. And they've got the same reach here, so there's no reach advantage for Tom. As we know, Tom's got a great jab. We saw that in his last fight. He got the quick win over I think he was a late notice replacement, KB Buller, put him away in the 1st round. The fight before that, we saw kind of where, this is kind of an example of where my reservations with Tom come. The Brendan Allen fight just kind of wilted under the ground and pound, basically. He made a mistake. He tried to jump on Brendan Allen's back. He ended up on the bottom, and then he just got pounded out. The other thing as well with Breese is he's not been past round 1 since June 2016. So we are going back 4.5 years since he went past round 1. Now, from memory, I don't remember him slowing down in fights, but it's still something to be conscious of. It's a long time not to go past round 1. So is there a chance the advantage that most guys have against Omari going into round 3 doesn't happen here? I don't know. 4.5 years without going to round 2. It's a long, long time. He's not had much cage time. These last 3 fights have been over in the first round. Omari will bring it. He makes you hesitant because he throws with hammers. Tom Breese is definitely the more technical boxer. He's got real nice boxing, but it's just going to be interesting to see how Tom reacts to these bricks. Now, the problem with Omari is even though he's got bricks in his hands and he does make guys hesitant, he doesn't have the KO ratio, just doesn't back it up. But he does hit hard because you watch his fights and you can see guys go hesitant. Ian Heinisch, very solid chin. He wobbled him a few times, made him hesitant. Marvin Vettori hesitant. Now, I think if they fought now, Marvin would wreck him. But you watch that fight, he makes Marvin hesitant, where he's just throwing hammers at him. He's got that kind of power where, people respect it. But when you look at his record, it's decisions. His only KO win in the UFC was his debut, which is a complete brawl. If you go back and watch it, it only lasts 3.5 minutes. It's just a complete brawl. That's his only TKO win in the UFC, besides the Brian Ebersol fight, but that was a leg kick and a knee injury. Now, he hasn't stopped anyone else. So, the other problem is if he can't get Tom out of there and the round 3 issue rears its head again and he's not 2 rounds up, what's going to happen? Can he win round 3 against Tom Breese? But he could take Tom down. He can get takedowns here. Tom Breese I'm not overly sold on Tom's takedown defence. I mean, we haven't really seen it tested in the UFC. Brendan Allen, he jumped on his back and ended up on the bottom. And then the Nakamura fight, I think Nakamura took him down. That was when he was down at welterweight. I'm sure Nakamura got a couple of takedowns in that fight. Mari's, he's the best takedown guy that Tom Breese has faced. He's got the most power out of anyone Tom Breese has faced. So Omari can definitely pose some questions here that we haven't seen Tom have to answer. So I'm going to pick Omari. I mean, the concerns are that round 3 is a big issue for him. If we're 1-1 going into round 3, you've got to give the advantage to Tom Breese. And his lack of being able to put guys away, that kind of shows where his boxing lets him down, in that he's got hammers, but anyone can kind of throw a heavy shot. He just lacks the ability to follow it up and finish a fight off. Breese is definitely the better boxer, but I just question between his ears. I'm going to pick Omari. I'm going to go with Omari. I haven't bet it because I'm just, partially this is a bit of a fade on Tom and his ability to actually turn up and react well under pressure and being hit. We haven't seen all this. We just haven't seen him really being hit and under pressure, except for the ground and pound from Brendan Allen. So, but Tom does have good boxing, as I keep saying, and it wouldn't shock me if he was able to put Omari away with some of his, setting up his jab and his cross. He's got some, real good straight shots. But as I say, the reach advantage isn't there either, and just wonder how he's going to react to the power. So a lot of question marks for me with regards to Tom that I think will get answered in this fight. RE, the takedown defence. RE's ability to stay calm under fire. RE, seeing him go past round 3 for the first time in 4.5 years. It's a real interesting fight for me. But I'm going to go with Omari. That is my pick there, and he is the underdog. But I'm not overly confident. It's a hard fight. It's a hard fight to call. Main card, we've got Lerone Murphy first fight against Douglas Silva de Andrade. I like Lerone Murphy here. I think he's a bit of a dark horse in the division. He's a very good striker. He can switch stance seamlessly. I always like that in a striker. Very, very nice striking, and he's even shown I bet him against who was the guy he fought last, Ramos, and he was taking Ramos down, and I was like, "What are you doing? Stand up with him!" And he ends up finishing with ground and pound. So it's like, well, what do I know? But yeah, I mean, it still seems a little bit bizarre, but it worked for him. Obviously, the kid's got some ground game, some ground skills, and even in his debut against Tukov, he was short notice. He was getting taken down, but he was getting back to his feet, and he was showing some takedown defence in the fight as well. But as soon as he's taken down, though, he would kind of scoot back to the fence, try and get up on the fence. He showed solid cardio. It was really humid out there. Took it on short notice. So there's a lot to like about this kid. And Douglas Silva de Andrade is a very physical guy, but he's a bit of a Neanderthal. Which I mean that in the, it's a compliment. The guy will just, he kind of looks like something out of the Kevin Costner film. What's it called? Last of the Mohicans. That's what he reminds me of whenever I see him. Is that Kevin Costner, Last of the Mohicans? Well, he's got the other one, hasn't he? Dances with Wolves or something. But that's kind of the character he reminds me of. And he kind of fights like a Neanderthal. He's not the most technical, but he's real powerful. I mean, he's ripped to the bone. He's moved up to 145 now, and he's still absolutely shredded. But I think Lerone's probably going to be a bit bigger than him, and I just think he's too technical for Silva. Silva just, he just kind of plants his feet and tries to throw bombs. And I think unless he catches Lerone with something massive, I just think he's going to get outclassed. I don't see the fight hitting the mat. I think it's going to be on the feet for pretty much the duration. He's coming off a win over an extremely shot Renan Barão, and it was over a year ago now. I mean, we haven't really seen him much. He made his debut in the UFC back in 2014, and he's only fought like 7 times. So he's averaging like 1 fight a year. He's 35 years of age now, so he's starting to get towards the end of his career. Especially when you're a featherweight, mid-30s. You normally start to regress. He's the type of guy, like, you look at him physically, I'm not sure you're going to notice any physical drop off here in him. But at the end of the day, he's getting towards the end of his career. But I just don't feel he's skilled enough. We've seen him face a couple of good, solid strikers in Rob Font and Peter Yan, and obviously no shame in losing to either of them, but he just got completely outclassed. I mean, he did get a good win over Marlon Vera, but that was like 3 years ago now, and Marlon Vera is definitely an improved fighter, and if they fought now, you'd find Marlon Vera would be a considerable favourite in this fight. So I'm going with Lerone. I mean, there's not really any value. He's around -300 now. The early line, I think you could have got -200 or so. I don't think that was too bad. I'm sure people are parlaying Lerone. I'm sure he's getting chucked in parlays left, right and centre. The over-under, Andrade, he's been finished a couple of times. Rob Font managed to guillotine him, hurt him on the feet and guillotine him, and his corner pulled him out against Peter Yan. So I don't really have a massive feel for him in that regard. I don't have an issue with people using Lerone in a double. I wouldn't go huge, but I think that's understandable why people use him as a leg, and I definitely expect Lerone to win this fight. I think he'll just outclass him on the feet. Like I said, the seamless switching of stances. You can go from throwing one shot, switch stance, throw his next shot in the other stance. Very comfortable in both stances. I don't really want him to kind of. Well, I say not to engage in the grappling, but I mean, Andrade is way less of a threat on the mat than Ricardo Ramos. But you probably find Andrade physically is a lot stronger than Ramos. But if you're picking him apart on the feet, just keep the fight there. There's no need to take him down and risk ending up on the bottom and just making it hard work for yourself. But I'm going with Lerone. I like Lerone's game, and I think he's got a good future in the UFC. And I think the UFC are kind of giving him it's not an easy fight by any means, but he had 2 tough fights to start his UFC career, and this is still a tough fight, but I think the UFC are giving him a chance to get a W here. So I'm going to go with Lerone Murphy to get the victory. Matt Schnell, Tyson Nam next. Look, I like Matt Schnell. If his chin held up and he had a solid chin, he'd be a really solid fighter. But at the end of the day, his chin is dust. Just doesn't have a chin. He's got Tyson Nam here. I know that Nam's coming off a couple of knockout wins, which is good for him. The problem with him before was always his volume and him not letting his hands go enough. And does he now let his hands go more? I think he is training full time now since he came into the UFC, which he hadn't been before. I don't know if he's now a volume striker though. I mean, he did lose for the first round against Rivera. Now Rivera is very long and was basically using kicks to keep him at bay, but as soon as he landed, Rivera just folded, and I've just got to worry. Matt Schnell, as soon as he gets caught with a shot, I just see him imploding. But he is good. I like Schnell. He's got good hands. He's really fast with his hands. Very good grappling. But having a bad chin at flyweight, I mean, it's almost unheard of. And if you've got a bad chin at flyweight, it's an issue because the guys are so fast. They are going to land shots. And he's kind of got that style, Schnell, where he has got nice hands and nice boxing, but he kind of holds his feet and he's very, bolt upright when he throws. He's there to be cracked. So I haven't bet Tyson because I think overall, as a mixed martial artist, I think Schnell is the better fighter, but I just don't know if he can get Nam down. Nam's always a decent takedown defence, and on the feet, there's definitely a power advantage to Nam, and there's a massive durability advantage as well. So I've got to go with Nam by knockout. I haven't played it. I might have a look at Tyson Nam by KO. I'll see what the odds are, but the pick is Nam here to win the fight. Next, women's flyweight fight, Roxanne Modafferi, Viviane, Araujo. So as I touched on earlier, I wouldn't class this as a low-level fight for women's MMA. Roxanne and Vivi both, pretty high level. Now, Roxanne is a perennial underdog that always seems to come through. She is always underrated, and you can see why. I mean, she's got a 25-17 record, which is very misleading. She's improved a lot. She's 38 years of age. She doesn't look like a fighter. She's got no stand-up. Her stand-up hasn't improved per se, but she can be a little bit difficult to deal with on the feet because she does apply a lot of pressure. She will keep coming forward, but she does get cracked a lot. Now, she's only been knocked out once in her career, and I think that was from a slam. But I am starting to have some reservations about her chin. She's starting to get rocked in fights. Like I remember the Sarge Eubanks fight, she got pretty badly rocked in. The Lauren Murphy fight, she got rocked in, and I'm just trying to think. I think Jennifer Meyer rocked her as well, but no one put her away. She still managed to survive until the end. But where Roxy excels is she's got tricky takedowns, and if she gets on top of you, she's really good at maintaining top control. She's really heavy on top. And this is where people come undone against her, is she manages, as I say, she just keeps moving forward on the feet. It's a way of her closing the gap, getting to the clinch on the fence and getting the takedowns. So, that's her path in pretty much every fight, and that's going to be what she's going to try and do here. Now, she would definitely benefit from being in the smaller cage with that style. This is in the bigger cage. But Viviane Araujo is the kind of girl where I just think Roxy struggles against the athletic, faster, physical girls. And I mean, when you look at her record, even if we just look over the last few years, Nico Montano, who she gave her a competitive fight. Nico's got no stand-up, but Nico's pretty strong physically. Lost that fight. Sajara Eubanks, who's moved up to 135 now. She's a strong... At 125, she was very physical. She lost that fight. Jennifer Meyer, very good boxing. Strong as well. You saw that against Shevchenko, where she actually managed to take Shevchenko down. She lost that fight. And then Lauren Murphy, and I bet Lauren Murphy as an underdog there against Roxy. Lauren Murphy, very strong in the clinch. And, her striking's striking's not great, but it's better than Roxy's. And if you can nullify Roxy in the clinch, then she's going to have a hard time winning the fight. So Vivi, very athletic, very powerful. The knock on Vivi has been cardio. She uses a lot of eccentric movement in there, a lot of needless movement. But she seemed to have shored that up against Montana. There was a lot less of the kind of bouncing in and out for no reason. And, you know, she used to do it when she wasn't throwing anything. It was just, you're just wasting energy. But she done it a lot less against Montana, which was good to see. And she lasted for the 3 rounds, didn't slow down. She's got solid boxing. Like I said, power for a lady. She does hit hard. She's got good calf kicks. That could be an issue for Roxanne here. She's got pretty skinny legs. Vivi throws those calf kicks pretty heavy, so that could be a problem for her. And I can see her walking into some power shots. She's going to, obviously, as I say, she's going to try and close the gap. So she's going to walk into some shots here. She's going to try and get the clinch. Vivi is strong physically. I think she's going to need Vivi to slow down to get the takedowns here. I don't think Vivi's been taken down in a UFC career. She did end up on the bottom against Alexis Davis, but that was actually Vivi taking her down to relieve the pressure. Davis went for a heel hook and Vivi rolled and ended up on the bottom. But otherwise, she hasn't been taken down. So, but, you know, Roxy is the underdog queen. She wins fights she shouldn't. So I understand why people would bet her as an underdog here, because she'd fight her best. I just think she's outmatched here personally. I'm going to pick Araujo to win this fight. I can, as I say, I'm not going to say you shouldn't bet Roxy. If you want to bet her as a dog, you would have won money betting Roxy as an underdog. She doesn't win every fight, but she comes through as an underdog a lot. I mean, against Macy Barber, huge underdog. And she came through there. Now, I know people say the knee injury, but, she took her down right off the bat in round 1. So, even without the knee injury, she might have won that fight. But Vivi, just very fast, very explosive, very good athlete, physically strong, powerful striker. I don't think the worst bet in the world is Vivi by KO here. I don't. Or Vivian's. I'm not sure what Vivi inside the distance pays. I know KO is like plus 300. I don't think it's the worst bet in the world, because I think Roxy is going to reach some calf kicks here that could jeopardise her balance. And I dread to think what Roxy looks like if she has to switch to southpaw. I think it could look very messy. And Vivi cracks. You saw that in her UFC debut when she knocked out the girl in round 3. And she landed some big shots against De La Rosa. She's a little beast, Araujo, but she's got to be careful. She's got to pace herself, fight smartly again, not use too much eccentric movement, because if she does start to slow down, Roxy could definitely take advantage. But I'm going to go with Vivi here. I just think it's all round a tough fight, and I think Roxy definitely will need Vivi to slow down here to have any chance. But Roxy's got to be careful crushing the distance here, because she's probably going to get hit like she possibly hasn't been hit before in her career, because Vivi, for a lady, does have some real crack in her punches. And as I say, I really like that calf kick she used against De La Rosa as well. So I will pick Araujo here, but I can't fault anyone if they're having a stab on Roxy. Next fight on the card, Isaac Villanueva against Vinicius Moreira. Jeez, this is a real low-level fight. I think Isaac, he has fought at middleweight a lot, but I think he's been at light heavyweight for a little while now. I mean, he has fought at heavyweight before. He did in his UFC debut. Looks in much better shape now. I mean, he's coming off a loss to the Beverly Hills Ninja. He got cut. You can't really take much from that fight. And Chase Sherman just picked him apart, basically, boxed him up. But that's not going to happen here. He's the better striker here. Moreira's going to want to get the fight to the floor. If Moreira gets him down, I think he's in trouble. I think Moreira's got a good, solid top game. But, God, this fight. Look, I think it should be a pick'em. I'm not betting Vinicius Moreira. I did type thinking there might be some value here at plus 120, and I think there is ever so slight value, but it's just not enough for me to bet someone like Vinicius Moreira. He's zero stand-up, extremely hittable. He's been knocked out in the UFC a few times. He just hasn't looked good. He got a good win on the Contender Series against John Allen, where he managed to just keep taking Allen down. Eventually got a submission. And Isaac Villanueva, when I done tape, there's just no recent takedown defense evidence. It's just been a long time since we've seen him having to defend takedowns. And let me just bring up his record and see if I can remember what fight it was. I think it was the Antonio Jones fight, the last time you really see takedown defense. I think he got taken down once in that fight. But that was, you're talking 4 years ago. So, I just hate fights when there's, Moreira's path to victory is taking him down, and we just haven't seen his takedown defense in 4 years. That just put me off betting Moreira, as well as how bad Moreira is. But I'm going to pick Moreira just because he's the underdog. I think there's ever so slight value on him, but tread with caution if you're actually going to bet Vinicius Moreira. The under is tempting because Villanueva he's been to a decision 3 times in victory. All these other wins, 14 wins by knockout, 3 decision wins. That Antonio Jones fight was the last one that went to a decision, and I'm sure that was 3 3-minute rounds. Before that, he went to a decision over 3 5-minute rounds, and then he had like a little spell of he had 3 decisions out of 4 fights, and the 4th fight was a round 3 loss against Trevin Giles. But besides that, it was actually a span of 5 fights that went to round 3 of decision. 4 went to a decision, 1 ended in round 3. But apart from that, he's pretty much, you're talking a lot of round 1s, and his last 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 or 6 fights have all ended in round 1. 1 went to round 2. So he's only lost by decision once. So normally if he loses, he gets stopped. Been stopped 10 times. Moreira, never been to a decision. So for me personally, if I was going to play this fight, I haven't played it yet, but it'd probably be the under. That's where I'd be tempted. Just if Moreira gets a takedown, I think Villanova's in trouble. And on the feet, I think Moreira's just so hittable. But does Villanova hit hard enough at light heavyweight to put him away? I mean, he did put Rashad Coulter away. So, yeah, you've got to think he probably does. I mean, Vinicius, for all intents and purposes, got KO'd by Paul Craig. I know it was a submission, but he got hurt with punches. And then Alonso and Anders put him away quickly. But, they are big punchers, Anders and Alonso. And Craig, it was a knee really that hurt him. So, Villanova doesn't have the power of Anders and Alonso, I'm sure. So, the worry is, would he just be able to take Villanova's power? But he's so bad, he might just get overwhelmed and the ref might just stop the fight. So I think the under. If you're going to bet anything now, I think personally the under. And I'm going to pick Moreira as he's a slight underdog, but I'm definitely not confident, guys. Definitely not confident. Co-main event is Mounir Lazzez taking on Warlley Alves. Look, I don't think there's any value on the money line now. It did open at like a pick'em. I definitely think there was good value on Lazzez there, even maybe down to the minus 150 area. Warlley Alves is a flake for me. I don't like betting flakes. I don't trust them. If he doesn't get you out of there in round 1, I think it spells trouble. And Lazzez was so cool under fire against Razak, and maybe that win hasn't aged as well as it was at the time because of Razak's subsequent quick KO loss in his next fight. But still, the way he remained calm under fire, very composed, that's something you can't teach. The way he done that was impressive. Warlley Alves, he looked good against Sergio Moraes, but Sergio Moraes looked awful in his last few fights, real bad. You just can't trust Warlley's cardio, and we've just seen him flake so many times. Randy Brown, just good start, and he just looked so tired at the end of the first round, completely schooled by James Krause. even you go back to like the Salim Tahari fight, that was quite a close fight. He did win the decision, but it was a competitive fight. And I'm just not sold on Warlley at all. I'm going to pick Lazzez. I don't think there's any value on the money line. If anything, the value's probably with Warlley now, but he's just a flake for me. He falls in the flake category, and even as an underdog, I'm not tempted to bet him here. He might be dangerous round one. He's got that dangerous guillotine, but I really liked what I saw from Lazzez. Can Warlley take him down and win that way? Like he was doing against Randy Brown until we gassed out. And he still got the takedown in round 2, but then he got caught in a submission. That might be a path for him, possibly. Maybe grinding out the first couple of rounds, but I'm picking Lazzez still. I liked Lazzez. I liked what I saw from him. I wasn't sold on him, I've got to admit, before his UFC debut. Watched some of his regional fights, and I wasn't blown away, but he looked like he's clearly improved. And this is what happens when these guys come off the regional scene, especially when there hasn't been any tape for a couple of years. They can make big leaps. He is 33 years of age himself, so he's older than Warlley. But I did like what I saw from him, so I'm going to pick Lazzez here, maybe by decision. Warlley's normally pretty durable, but I'm going to go Lazzez. Round 1 could be competitive, but it's just the way Warlley slows down. I just can't back him here. Main event: Chiesa versus Magny. I'm going with Magny here. I think 5 rounds favours him. Now, there's definitely a possibility that Chiesa could get a submission, especially early in the fight, first couple of rounds. He looked very good at welterweight against RDA. Chiesa finally made the move, and it paid off for him. But what I don't like about Chiesa is he's still, he's very one-dimensional still for a fighter in 2021. Now, that one dimension is very strong. He's a very good grappler. He's very good on top. He's got good submissions, but he's still got absolutely zero striking. So on the feet, he's definitely going to be at a disadvantage here. This definitely would have been better for Chiesa if it was in the apex, so in the small cage, and over 3 rounds would have been better for him as well. I definitely wouldn't. I did put a little bit on Magny when it was announced that it was 5 rounds. I went and done tape, and look, I can see why people like Chiesa here. I just don't like him over 5 rounds. I think if I was going to bet Chiesa now, I'd rather just bet his submission line personally. I don't think he wins a decision here. Neil Magny can fight at an incredible pace for 5 rounds. He just doesn't slow down. But his fight IQ can be a bit questionable. He does like being in the clinch, Neil Magny. He loves being in the clinch. You saw that against Rocco Martin, and I don't know why he kept going to it against Rocco. I don't know whether it was to wear him out, which was very risky over a 3-round fight, because he was winning at range. He was backing Rocco up. He was landing the better shots. I don't know whether he was really worried about the calf kick maybe, but he was the one pressuring. When you've got someone on the back foot, it's really difficult for them to land kicks when they're moving backwards. So I don't know, but when you watch his fights, he does like being in the clinch, but normally he has an advantage there. He was actually out-muscled in the clinch against Rocco until Rocco slowed down. So that is a worry here, because if he's going into the clinch with Chiesa, that's where Chiesa wants to be. And while he is reasonably strong in the upper body tie-up, Magny, he can still be taken down from there. Lee took him down from the body lock, but he's got them long legs. If Chiesa can get in on them legs, it's going to be hard for Magny to stuff the takedowns. So, and as I say, we have seen him submitted in the past in the UFC. We saw it against RDA. We saw it against Damian Maia. If Chiesa gets to his back, it's dangerous times for Neil Magny. But the longer the fight goes, the more it favours Magny for me. Terrific work rate. Will Chiesa slow down as well? I thought he looked like he was slowing against RDA. Now, I know he won round 3. He got the takedown. He got him away from the fence. He got him in the middle of the octagon, and RDA couldn't get back up. But it definitely looked like he was slowing down to me. Whether he got a second wind, I don't know. It would have been interesting to see how that fight looked if he didn't get that takedown or RDA got back to his feet. And if Neil fights at a higher pace, which I think he will here, but I just don't really want to see him engaging in the clinch. I think he'd be wise just to try and back Chiesa up here. He's the much better striker. Use his length, and just beat Chiesa up on the feet. If Chiesa clinches up with him, which he's going to try and do, then, see how this clinch situation plays out. Try and reverse the position. Lean on Chiesa if you feel comfortable there, but I wouldn't hang out there too long. I get why he might do it to try and tire him out, but what happens if Chiesa doesn't tire out and he ends up keep getting taken down from the clinch? And and Chiesa's takedowns aren't bad, and he can kind of mix them up. When I've done tape, different takedowns, he hits quite a few different takedowns, but he's not got the best top control. I know he kept RDA down for all of the third round, but when you watch a lot of his fights, like Carlos Condit had a couple of decent submission attempts and it allowed him to reverse the position or get back to his feet. A few other fights, he's also a bit of a sucker for the heel hook sweep. He's got them long legs, and then Neil Magny's got the long legs as well. So, it's not necessarily round gone if he does get a takedown, but Neil has to be really careful he doesn't give his back up. That's the unknown here. We just haven't really seen Neil's takedown defence or get up game really tested for a long time. You've got to go back to the Johnny Hendricks fight, but Johnny Hendricks, different level wrestler to someone like Chiesa. But Lee did get him down, but he got up quickly, kicked him out, got his feet on his hips and kicked him out. And Rocco Martin got him down, I think it was once. And there I think it was from half guard, he took an underhook, turned into Rocco and stood back up. So, he didn't give his back on them 2 occasions, and he's definitely got to be careful giving his back when he's trying to get back to his feet against Chiesa. But I'm going to go Neil Magny. I don't think there's any value on the current line. I took Magny when he went down to -120. He's like -145 now. I wouldn't bet that, but I definitely think 5 rounds favours him. And I think this fight turns around, I think Chiesa needs to finish probably in the first couple of rounds, but there's definitely a possibility he could get that, because if he does put Neil on his back, Neil's got to be really careful. He's going to have to sacrifice getting up if the only path to him getting up is where he needs to give his back up. I think he's just going to have to sacrifice getting up and stay on his back. He can't afford to give his back up here against Chiesa. But I'm going to go with Magny. But it's an interesting fight. But Chiesa for me, he's just really one-dimensional. But styles make fights at the end of the day, and there is a path for him here against Neil Magny, because Neil Magny doesn't have rock-solid takedown defence. Chiesa against a good striker with solid takedown defence, he's going to be in big trouble. But this is kind of a winnable fight for him, and it will be a really good scalp for him, because Magny's been on a good roll since he came back. He beat Lee, Rocco, Robbie Lawler. Chiesa having Magny and RDA wins in his back pocket would be really impressive for him. So there's definitely a path, but I think it diminishes a lot past the second round, where I think Magny can take over with his pace. So he's got to be careful first couple of rounds. Don't sacrifice giving your back up just to get up. Just lose the round if you have to. Don't engage in the clinch, Neil. Back him up. Use your long range striking. Chiesa isn't good on the feet. Maybe if you start to feel him tiring, then start applying the clinch, then start leaning on him, tiring him out more. But I just wouldn't early on anyway give him the opportunity to turn him and use his strength to get Neil down to the floor. So I'm going to go with Magny there, probably by decision, but possibly some kind of late finish. So that wraps it up, guys. Wednesday card. I'll be back later in the week to do the Saturday card. ProMMABetting.com. Packages are available on the site if you want to sign up. Wednesday we've got a couple of pre-bets, and we'll have live betting as well. So good luck with your bets, and I'll be back later in the week.